Welcome to the November 18th Coordination Circle for the Lifeboat Academy. And we start in the usual way, making sure that we start in a good way. And there's Ronnie. So we usually start with a grounding and land acknowledgement, or land acknowledgement and grounding. And is there anybody who feels moved to do the land acknowledgement tonight, or otherwise I will? All right. I was thinking on the way in, because this is my second land acknowledgement of the day, and which I don't mind. And at some point I was thinking, all customs start to calcify, and peace of the Lord be with you and also with you. And I was just thinking, well, get to the point where we start our meetings, land was here first, be here after. And but that is the gist. The gist is the land was here before we were, and the land will continue on after we are gone, individually and even as a people, as a species. And we are only here because somehow we fill a niche in the ecosystem. And so we start with that reminder to put ourselves in the right perspective of where we fit in the grand scheme of things, which is we fit in the grand scheme of things as one little part. So we're not isolated, we're not outside, we're not alone. We are integrated into a larger whole. And this is something that our ancestors have known for a very long time. I think it's something that all of our ancestors knew, wherever we may be from, and some of our ancestors remembered more were able to remember longer until the present day. And so let us acknowledge the wisdom keepers from all of our ancestries, from all of our lineage, the people who clung to the important truths and found a way to share them, even in the face of great adversity and cost to themselves. And in particular, I'm speaking of the plight of Native Americans and First Nations people who had to hold that knowledge in the face of a pointed gun. And so in acknowledging that, we also acknowledge a debt of obligation of doing what we can to repair things where harms have been made, and to figure out what is the niche that we actually deserve to occupy and the part that we have to play in the whole thing. So let us be good ancestors, let us be good neighbors and good relations. And yeah, can we strive to find a healthy balance in all things? And so with that, I'm going to just invite us to a moment of physically grounding yourself. So get comfortable, remind yourself of the body in the seat. Feel the weight of your body pressing down on the seat beneath you. And take a deep breath in. Feel your lungs expanding, the oxygen entering your bloodstream. And then as you exhale, just feel the weight of your body pressing down on the seat, and the relaxation that comes with letting go of what no longer serves. And so take a moment to let go of anything that keeps you from being present here tonight with us, to the extent that you are able. And when you're ready, come join us back in the circle. So I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I have been very phlegmy for today and also in meetings all day. And so I'm not sure how long my voice will hold out. But let us take a look at the agenda. And, oh, sorry, check-in. Let's give everyone a chance to check in. And does anyone have a burning check-in question you want to offer up?
What about what compass point am I facing?
Cool. And the circle as I see it is April, Roland, Ronnie, me. And I'll put that in chat. So April, why don't you kick us off with your own check-in?
I'm facing north at the moment, but very aware that the sun sets to my left in the west, and that I would rather be looking in that direction and being fully aware of the sunset, I guess. And on to Roland.
Gosh, these questions. Uh,
What direction are you pointing in?
I am actually pointing east. And there was a really fun thing that I liked from we did a workshop led by Vanessa Andriotti that was being offered through the Joanna Macy group, forget what they're called. And one of the things that her co-facilitator did was to get you to hum so that you could feel the vibrations in your bones. And then from the humming, connect to the direction. Or I took that and then I was like, sort of like to get an embodied feeling of the cardinal points to go from my bones. So over to Ronnie.
I'm facing south. And I wasn't quite sure because I'm dog sitting, so I'm at a house that's not my house. But I guessed based on the roads, and then I checked my map and I was right. So that makes me feel good about my sense of direction. Over to Ben.
I am facing west. And it's interesting. We're facing in each of the four different directions. And I'm brought to mind there are many layers of symbolism laid on the directions in terms of who they represent and what qualities they represent, and how I think I like the metaphor that we are representing all four directions among the four of us tonight. That's lovely. All right, so now back to the agenda. And we have a lot of things to check in on from the last time we met. So all of these things on the top here are just calling our attention to them. We don't necessarily need to talk about all of them. I think there's some that we might want to report in the updates. And then on the agenda, I have a few things that I added, and of course, we'll go around and see if there's anything else that is on your mind. Two sort of further updates, just to check in on the 2025 cohort recruitment, how that's going and what next steps there might be, what we've been doing, how it's going, and what the next steps are. Same for the feedback on the legal structure, on the bylaws or rules of association. And so those are just checking in on progress. And then I also have thinking forward about our annual review process, our annual planning process, just because we are at that time of the year where at one point we will blink and it will be January. And so my goal for tonight is at least to have us have a kind of the milestones laid out in broad steps, just so we have a sense of what needs to be done. I don't think a lot has to be done right now, you know, and but it's just kind of getting those things out. And then we have our standing item, which is to choose something like a feature item for the newsletter, which we've been skipping on the previous meetings, which is why I wanted to mention it specifically here. So among the four of us, hopefully we'll remember to do that. So that's what is currently up for offer on the agenda. We'll do just a round. Do these work for you? And is there anything else that's on your mind that you want to cover? And over to you, April.
This works for me, and there's nothing else I want to cover. Over to Roland.
Over to Ronnie.
Back to you, Ben.
Cool. Well, and actually a question, because this is our coordination meeting. Actually, I'm not even going to ask a question. It's our coordination meeting. Protocols are good. We said that this is important to do. Let's do it, which is let's revisit our North Star. And I think in the interest of just brevity, we can hit the North. Well, actually, sorry, I'm bouncing all over the place. I am working it out as I'm going, and I'm going to trust the circle that we will take the amount of time that we need to take to do the check-in on the North Star. And it doesn't have to take a long time. So I'm gonna propose our kind of classic. Oh, don't look, don't, the answers are already written there. Don't cheat. But I'm gonna propose our classic, and which is you can answer one or all three of the questions. What are we trying to accomplish together? What is this thing that we're trying to do? Why is that important? And where are we now? And I will type those prompts into the chat, and you can answer one, all three, whatever feels right. The goal, of course, is just to get a sense of what's the big picture that we're trying to accomplish. So April, over to you.
I'm just going to relate to what are we trying to accomplish. I find it really handy to keep asking this question so that I know if I'm on the same page with anybody else. And it reminds me that it's probably important and worth paying attention to. So what I think we are trying to accomplish is coming together to establish a collective approach to building resiliency and returning to the commons. So we're all unlearning, relearning, and just learning in amongst all of this, which has its own sets of demands, but there's good reason for that. And over to Roland.
So what are we trying to accomplish? So the times are really juicy. There's lots of opportunity to practice, and we're proposing, well, we are attempting to practice with awareness and offering others to join us in practicing with awareness, because as we know, we're always practicing. Most people practice unconsciously things that they don't really want, and we're proposing to practice consciously, and that by practicing consciously, we can alleviate the suffering that comes with the pain that comes with change, and the pain that we are experiencing with the polycrisis and the metacrisis. I've been reading up on the difference between those two terms, which is very interesting, but no conclusions yet. Thank you very much. Over to Ronnie.
We are developing and evolving a curriculum and framework to support lifeboat builders around the world. And it's important because hell and a handbasket and all that, as some wise folks in this room have said before. Where are we now? We are reaching out to recruit our 2025 cohort and seeing who comes through the door. Over to you, Ben.
Um, yeah, let's, I don't know if I have anything. Well, yeah, we're also trying to figure out what comes next. And which I think we all agree is something like a commons. And so we're centering the land to decenter the ego. And that's part of what a commons requires and offers. And I feel like it links in with what Roland was saying in terms of the juiciness of practicing consciously. Because I feel like there's an element of personal healing in what we're doing. Well, and healing from colonization and the accumulated unresolved traumas of the last fill-in time period. 500,000, 10,000, not sure. But yeah, I think that's the part of what we're doing is also creating the conditions that allow healing to happen. And then see Helena Handbasket, their comment there on. So we've each had a chance to do our initial share. We'll do one more time around to give everyone a chance to respond. So given that first round, what are you noticing? What stands out to you? What's coming up for you now? April, over to you.
What's coming up for me is that there's some practical things and some very large metaphysical things, I guess, in what we're saying, and both of those things, categories of things, need to be there, I believe. On to Roland.
We weave our strengths together in such a way that our weaknesses become irrelevant. Over to Ronnie.
I just kept right on taking notes. I like this. That's all. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I'm going to circle back to April's original thing of it's good to do this. It's worth the time. It's a good reminder. So, oh. There. Awesome. So we've revisited our North Star. We've done our grounding and check-in. I'm going to propose that we skip the annual review because that's kind of what we need to talk about. Or reviewing our current plan and seasonal plan. So if there are no objections, I'll just consider this done. Seeing no objections. Similarly, our calendar, I will stop share there. And our calendar is fairly straightforward at the moment, but let's still take a glance at it. So here we are already 3/4 of the way through November. We have Connect the Dots tomorrow night, which is our last of the deep adaptation questions. I'm meeting with Foodlands on maybe that meeting might be moved. I'm also meeting with Celia Wandio to talk about bylaw stuff. She's with the Canadian Coalition for Community Land Trusts, I think. I'm not sure what their official name is, but Community Land Trusts. We've got Heartwork on Thursday. We've got an agreement circle on Friday with at least a couple people signed up. And following week, next week, will be the newsletter will go out again on Monday. So just to cut that on our radar that this is kind of the week of developing the newsletter. We have another, the twin agreement circle for next Monday. We don't have anyone signed up for that. So that's probably not going to happen. But then we do have outreach meeting with Pam that I set up. And finance and legal next Friday. So those are just a overview of the activities that are up. Any additions or questions? If you don't, give me a thumbs up. If you do, jump in.
Are there any, is that the last Connect the Dots Club, or is there one after that?
Tomorrow is the last one, and we
Okay.
don't have anything scheduled after that. So this is
Okay,
actually a
so-
phantom.
That's just a placeholder then.
Yeah,
Okay, I think it can stay there just as long as.
actually, I think the repeating ones, I'm gonna just delete this just to keep the calendar clear, you know, keep it honest with just that event. Any other questions or comments?
Could I just ask about the color coding?
The green, so there's my calendar shows up and Roland's calendar shows up. So those are two of the colors. And then the colors here are guilds are green,
Right.
and then everything else is blue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And back to the agenda. Oops, that's not the button. All right, so guild reports. And we had a note from before as one of the comments was if we can keep our reports brief, that'll give us more time to spend on weaving together the bigger picture stuff. So let's go over to Heartwork and Philosophy and oops, wrong one. Sorry. All right. So anyone want to give the report?
Oh, yes. If you click on it, I prepared.
Ooh.
So this is, I'm just trying it out. Oh,
This is the one that I wrote after the last meeting from our notes.
okay. Well, I wrote one just sort of drawing on it for things that I thought were, I don't know where it is and I don't want
I
to look
do.
for it.
It's
Oh,
here's what you wrote.
yeah. So because you were doing the annual report, so I didn't want to comment on that, but I did draw stuff from it and added a little extra. And what I drew from it was in talking about our process that
I'm copying it here
okay,
because it's your report, so I'm just going to put it right where it goes.
okay,
There.
all right. So in we were discussing the importance of reminders and of doing just like the North Star that we did today, that peppering our meetings with reminders such as that is really important to be able to keep things fresh. And the reminders, interestingly, are also in the form of the oral tradition. So they shift, they have the potential of shifting. We were also looking at, the idea of having quarters in a year, and that the yearly report is useful in being able to get the whole picture, because each quarter is its discrete thing, but then looking at how they flow into each other can be really useful.
Mhm.
And then I think the next thing that we're working on is where have we been putting our efforts so that we can refocus to learn from that and to see what's the 20 that will get us 80. We also talked, because we're the separation of guilds is something that we made up, as with any other political system. We just made it up, and so we were looking at the roles of the different guilds, and to be able, in part, to be able to help clarify even more for us the role of the Heartwork and Philosophy Guild. And then because I had a note that there was a cool quote at one of our meetings at the end of September, I went back and listened to them to try to find what I was talking about, because my note was not very clear. And I listened to the day that Becca arrived. We talked about a badging system, or a way of doing badging that was actually really interesting and that we haven't talked about since. So I wanted to pull that forward. So where the idea, and this is just very, very briefly and loosely, it's not that there's any kind of board or master that awards the badge, but rather it is peers who are, I mean, there's, so very briefly, I'm not going to go into details. The idea is that it's peer to peer. People can give tickets towards awarding a badge if when they notice somebody doing something. And it can be, you know, even just in terms of a spiritual practice, it is, I noticed you were noticing, and I thought that was really great. So here's a token towards your whatever badge. So it becomes less official and more interactive with everybody. And it also helps to break down any kind of hierarchy that might develop. So I said brief, right? So that's what I have to report on. We didn't meet at the last meeting because one of our board, our guild members was absent, and we missed her, and we didn't want to talk without her. So we didn't have a meeting last time, and I wanted to fill something in this time to practice this. So back to you, Ben, or the next guild or whatever.
Well, I think over to April in case there's anything you want to add.
Oh yeah.
Well, I just want to send a token to my co-hoster, coordinator. Well, I can't even remember what the term is.
Caretaker.
Caretaker, who has taken it upon himself to get a report assembled, really. And you know, in the spirit of peer-to-peer stuff, I just want to send my peer whatever it might be, not quite a badge, but more than a good wish. So
Thank you. I am playing my air guitar in my mind.
Awesome. Cool. I actually ditto. I would send you a token too, and I think it was a really good summary. And I'm really pleased that you brought up the peer-to-peer badge stuff. And it's very hard for me not to talk about it right now, but I think that is the mature and responsible thing to do, even though it is really cool. And now I remember, and now it's like, oh, right. Anyhow, I just want to make space for Ronnie. Any questions or observations?
Ben, I think you get a token for your restraint. I think that's cool. It feels more relational and playful. And kind of like, and I feel like there's some kind of, I don't know if it's dopamine or serotonin, but in the moment to hear like, oh, I see you. That's really cool. Here's a token. It's like, oh, yay. Instead of like, did you fulfill the requirements? It's like kind of boring. So yeah, I like it. And that's all I have to say. Over to Ben.
Who is not going to continue the conversation about it because he agrees that it is really cool what you just said. And so we'll go back to the next guild, which is research and learning. I am going to start reporting again on that. And I will say it kind of has been moribund, but I've been thinking recently about having a research council. We kind of already talked about this, but almost like a content expert peer to the stewardship council. So the Stewardship Council represents the people, or maybe we talk about how we get kind of content knowledge on in there. But anyhow, that's one of the ideas as we're talking about bylaws and structure things and things like that. And as part of the annual planning, I am looking forward to clarifying the overlap between the guilds when now there is a research and learning one, and like what activities go with which guild. So anyhow, I think that's pretty much the report. There's not much to report there. Any questions or comments though? Just do popcorn. Hearing none, moving on. Finance and legal. Actually, I will change this. So the big thing is we now have an operations manual that is full and complete and reasonably up to date. So there is one document called the Lifeboat Academy Operating Agreements that it used to be our Book of the Farm or our manual. I can't even remember the name it had before, but it has links to all of the documents. It has an overview and then links to all of the documents. So I'm not saying that they are final, but they are in a good enough place where people could review them and say, actually, this would make more sense to do this or whatever. But they mostly reflect our current way that we do things. So that is complete. And meetings are ongoing. I just had one this afternoon with somebody. We're getting really good feedback. Generally, there are no red flags in any of the feedback. It all looks like we can move forward. And Becca is in the process of arranging a meeting with lawyers. And so the next steps are kind of continuing to roll out. Right now, we're really focusing on getting feedback on the rules of association, but this parlays right into talking with potential shareholders and the materials that we're developing for that. So yeah, I think that's where that is. Roland, do you have anything you want to add? And April
There is something I would like to add. Actually, token or kudos or whatever to Ben, because there have been a lot of meetings and it's all been very interesting and exciting. And it is also a lot of work and a lot of effort. The meetings, the notes, the collating the information, all of that stuff. So
thank you. Yes. And I feel like I've taken my document formatting. I've worked forward on my document formatting responsibilities, so I might be able to take like a year off of having to format any documents. Cool. Oh, and Ronnie and April, any questions, comments?
No, just to say that I think that we should award that honorary LLB or whatever it might be in terms of you having plowed through acres of procedural and whatever stuff on the road to developing this document.
Ronnie, anything?
Excellent work. Thank you. Nothing
Awesome.
more to add. Back to you.
All righty. Then over to Farm, Food, and Housing. Roland, you want to? Oh, not done. And
we keep doing things and we keep not having an official meeting about it.
yeah.
So back to you, Ben. Anything you would like to add?
No, we are moving towards winter hibernation, which is not entire. I've been ditching. That's been exciting. And stuff has been happening and it's really and it's dark at 4 o'clock, so it's really hard to fit things in the day.
And I harvested my first leeks, which is a huge for me, because I think this is the most successful leek growing experiment I've had to date. And we've been loading up our larder with things also to store and save for later. So that's been
Ye-
fun.
Yeah, I was going to say actually tokens to Roland too, because we are harvesting from the garden. And you know, it's pretty bleak out there, and we are still harvesting greens from the garden, you know, not kale. Not, you know, it's not just that anyone can harvest kale in the winter. This is actually food that tastes good. So,
And I've always been afraid of growing cauliflower. Turns out it's super easy.
oh, and it's so good. It's so
I am
delicious.
going to do it again.
Yay. Okay. So farm, food, and housing, any questions, comments? I'm imagining no. All right. Then last up, outreach and network guild.
So we have nominations coming in for the cohort. Website updates were happening, and then I clicked the wrong button and broke the back end. So I'm waiting for David to email me to say, hi, I fixed it. So more to come on that front, hopefully.
Yeah.
Since the last meeting, Ben and I have been working on outreach related things for the cohort. I did the outreach posts today, or proposal for a post with different slides. Ben has downloaded the nominations info from the Jot form and created a database, which I haven't looked at, but I'm looking forward to it. And also compiled language to add to the website whenever we have access to that again. At our last meeting, we talked through all kinds of stuff related to outreach for the cohort. And we have one question that we wanted to bring to the coordination circle, which is, where does 2025 cohort stuff live? And there are different aspects to, you know, there's the outreach parts, but what are the other parts, and which guilds do they belong to? And in terms of keeping on, I still need to draft a nomination confirmation email, and hopefully we'll be able to work on the website soon. And we're planning to do our annual report at the next meeting, so it will be good to wrap that up. Does anyone have anything else to add to this update? Ben or Roland, who were at the last meeting?
I'm actually, I want to take care of a little bit of work. Your slides look really good to me. The only potential change I would make is there's 5 of them, and the 4th one, there's a lot of words on it. It could be 2.
Okay.
And I think that's, otherwise, I think for me that it looks great, and it reads well as slides, I think, you know, it kind of, so good work. I think they look great. And the database for the cohort it's really, it's a spreadsheet, you know, it's really simple. But and that is one of the, I think that's the other part of talking through where the cohort lives, is also how does this nomination selection happen, and who are the touch points, and how do we, you know, who wants to be involved, and that kind of thing too. So so yeah, that would be it, I guess. Questions or reactions, April?
Well, I'm really interested in where the cohort does live, and I think it lives both in research and learning and artwork, to be negotiated therein, I think. That's it. I think actually outreach has done a good job in trying to figure out where the boundaries are, I think. And on to Roland.
Okay. All right, so we are done then with updates, and
Wow.
and I guess we pretty much have checked in on both of these things too. I don't think there's anything much to add. I'm gonna put a placeholder in next steps around the 2025 cohort, but let's go talk through the other stuff next. So just a placeholder there. Yeah, does anyone have any? I think we've covered both of the updates in the guild reports. Is there anything else that quick, actually thumbs up if they're covered, and if not, raise your hand and ask your question or make your comment. Cool. All right, so then annual review process, like I said, my big hope today is that we can just sort of talk through the big chunks and get a sense of, when do we need to start planning different things. And since I've been cleaning up our documents, we now have an annual planning agreement that lays out what we hope to accomplish, and it builds off of AIM Act Reflect and Sociocracy and how we do things anyhow, how we've set up our design charrettes. So and this is pretty much the language right out of that document. So the guilds produce an annual report, and it includes progress against the annual plan. And that obviously doesn't have to be how many widgets. It's really just kind of, here's where we started. Here's how we think we've done. Lessons learned, evidence of impact of any of the social benefits that we're trying to produce, and promising directions, next steps, ideas, basically it's anything for the good of the cause. Each guild does one of those. The coordination circle collates those reports. So they pull them together and then, provide an overview. We do have in there that we're supposed to do a decision-making audit. That's pulled out of Sociocracy. And I haven't seen much about what that looks like. And I think we should, we can talk through what that looks like. But basically, I think it's meant to be a double check. Do people feel like they have been included in the decisions that affect them? That, the underlying goals of Sociocracy are being met. So I think it is mostly a subjective review from people. But anyhow, it's in there, but it's not really fleshed out about what it means. And then there's this financial stuff that has to happen around, income, expenses, and surplus. I can tell you we don't have a surplus this year. Without the, waiting for the last additions, I'm pretty sure we do not have a surplus this year. So anyhow, this is kind of in the future will be a responsibility of the Stewardship Council. And then at the annual, so basically the reports come in, and then the Stewardship Council is supposed to meet and to look at progress on the current plan and the impact that we've created. That's really the Stewardship Council is meant to be the accountability, body. And so this is them looking at us and looking at the organization as a whole and saying, how are we doing? And then they produce lessons learned. And this is kind of the aiming part of the process. So they're supposed to look at the results of last year and say, well, what can we learn from this? And then given that, what should be our focus for the coming year? And the identifying those high priority areas for improvement, which is not to say they come up with a plan for that. So in the language we've used before, the Stewardship Council is writing RFPs, requests for proposals. So they're basically saying, here's the problem we're trying to solve. Here's the challenge we're trying to meet. How would you do this? And so it's supposed to be invitational. That goes out to everybody to generate, to the guilds in particular. So, it's a back and forth process. The guilds have done their review and said, are the lessons we've learned and what we think promising approaches are. And they give it to the Stewardship Council, and the Stewardship Council feeds that back to the guild and says, well, what about you try, aiming at this? So there should be a lot of coherence between what the guilds are already thinking about and what the Stewardship Council is asking them to do. And then you plan the charrette, and the charrette is when everyone works together to figure out what are the action plans that generate each of the guilds. So, you know, you're kind of in a sense, we reform the guilds every year. We review our functions and we review that, and we do that every year. And then there's a planning charrette, and then basically you're off to, you know, do what we decide to do in the charrette. So I feel like I've been talking too much about that, but I just wanted to kind of provide the context of what we say we're supposed to do. And so I'm going to do one round just for thoughts, reactions, questions around the context of what we're talking about. April, over to you. Any questions or ideas?
I'm finding this outline here to be very useful, and it's helping me to track what I need to be thinking about. I think I need a little more education on social benefits. I'm assuming that's this list that we have there, but I think for myself, I need to flesh it out a little bit, what that means.
Mhm.
That's it for me.
I
Over
think
to
it looks great. And I am looking forward to putting it into practice. So over to officially, because a lot of this is sort of unofficially, but yeah, so over to Ron.
I think it looks great too, and I can really see how it has evolved from previous years and iterations, and bringing the stewardship council back into things and reaffirming kind of what their role is and how everything works. So yeah, this is awesome and useful. Back to you, Ben.
Cool. And the social benefits, April, they are listed in our bylaws, and they are also listed on the website, I believe. But they include, it's basically carbon sequestration, ecosystem improvements, community resilience, food sovereignty, worker equity, a couple, I think there's 8 of them, but those are the things that we have said are the benefits that we're producing.
Yep.
It's also in our prospectus. So anyhow, that's brings you up to speed there. All right, so it sounds like we've got the context, and I'm gonna just do let's do gathering consideration style. So basically we are we're trying to lay out the kind of the next steps in this process. What should we be focused on, and anything good for the cause? Is that enough instruction? And we'll kind of trust the circle. Let me rephrase. I feel like it's the end of the day and I'm losing focus. The goal before us is we want to chunk out broadly speaking, the next steps so that we have adequate time to prepare ultimately for the design charrette, I think is really what we're kind of aiming at. But what are the things that we should be keeping in mind as we're chunking out the work? And we'll just do gathering considerations, 1 consideration per round, but we'll do multiple rounds until we feel like we have everything on the table. And you can always pass. So April, and in the first round, if you have any questions about what we're doing, you can ask that in the first round. So April, over to you, gathering considerations around the process.
Pass at this time.
Not fair. Well, I think it's probably so one thing at a time, right?
Yeah, and you can pass too. Everyone can pass, even the person after somebody who passed.
I know. Keeping it light and all that stuff. Well, there is the identifying the facilitation team. There, 1, over to Ronnie.
Where does this live? I'm trying to find it on Asana so I can read the whole thing.
I
Oh, it's
can,
private. Ho ho
oh,
ho.
there.
Oh,
I thought,
Okay, maybe
hang on, let me put, I thought I put it in the Springport already, but there,
there it. Oh, it went bye bye. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Okay. Thank you. That's yeah.
I also will put the link in the chat.
Um, so the guilds are working on the annual reports right now.
Mhm.
Um, the coordination circle will collate them. Every time I hear the word audit, I think of the IRS, which is scary. So just naming that. But a decision-making audit sounds like a much kinder than an IRS audit. Um, decision-making audit. I'm just using my time to process this more. Well, it seems like number one is finish the annual reports.
yeah.
And then hopefully, maybe at our next stewardship or next coordination circle, we can kind of look through them and start putting together a collated report. And I don't know if that's going to happen in the meeting or that's going to happen asynchronously or a combination of both. But that seems like the immediate next steps to me. I'm also curious about where we're at with the stewardship council, who the people who are on the stewardship council, a lot of them we haven't heard from for a very long time in my memory. So just a question about that. Over to Ben.
Yep, and that was gonna be, that was my consideration is, um, how do we reconvene the stewardship council? And when? So that's I'm gonna take that one over. Back to you, April.
Thank you, because actually you've identified 3 things that were on my mind. I just didn't know they were on my mind. Well, they were deeply covered in my mind, and you've revealed them to me. So, yeah, question around stewardship council and when, because I'm on the stewardship council, and I was just thinking, where's everybody? Where's Waldo? And how do we pin that down? The other thing is, yeah, finishing the annual report, which I kind of was starting to take for granted, but it's not done yet, so that's a little premature. I have a question about identifying the facilitation team. Is that the facilitation team for the charrette or for what? What is the team facilitating? And that could just be a question that hangs there for the moment. On to Roland.
Pass.
Um, I feel like as part of the stewardship council question, I feel like I need a review of what they're for, all of their responsibilities specifically. And I just have a concern, which is even if like we've sent emails out before to be like, do you still want to be on the stewardship council? And people just don't respond. So it's like, what do we do when people just don't respond to emails? Do we call them? Do we send a carrier pigeon? Like, the stewardship council to me has always felt kind of like a difficult thing relationally. So maybe there's a better way to do it. I don't know. Over to Ben.
Yeah, and well, and there's an overlap, a transition, because the stewardship council has always been something that only makes sense with a kind of larger organization, and um, as we are incorporating, our stewardship council will become an official thing, right? You know, it will become the fiduciary body of the cooperative. But also then that will make it more appealing for people. There'll be a clearer ask of what it means to be on the stewardship council. So my suspicion is that, and I've been trying to be really clear about interim stewardship council, that this is a group of people who are sort of standing in on that role until we get the permanent people who want to be in that role. So the stewardship council, I'll give you technically the stewardship council is pretty much the same as a board of directors. But because we use sociocracy, they're not at the top of a pyramid. They are basically the accountability body that is meant to oversee the commons as a whole. So it's supposed to be kind of a deliberative body that makes sure that all of our relations are represented and that we actually are adhering to our values and our goals, so that the work that we're actually doing matches what we say our principles and our goals are. Their responsibilities actually are very limited. So their sum total responsibility is they have a review session, and basically the last part of the design charrette, they officially tap it with the wand or whatever, and they make it the plan, right? But basically they are going to, the membership of the co-op through the guilds develops the annual plan, the actual action plan. And then the stewardship council says, this is good enough for now, safe enough to try, right? And that none of our relations could object to this, right? You know, like there are no objections from anything having to do with the commons about what we're trying to do. That's pretty much it. Like that's the role. And then, you know, technically they have a mid-season check-in, you know, like a midsummer, everything's moving along, but that's it. So it's kind of in some sense ceremonial. Anyhow, that I'll use that as my consideration and then pass over to April.
Fiduciary is a scary word, can go right under asset. The other thing is, yeah, I've kind of felt like stewardship council are ghosts in the machine somehow, and I'm one of them. I just can't quite see the other ghosts, and it feels like the responsibility is wandering around kind of the social landscape and pointing out features somehow, in a way. And every time I hear stewardship council, I feel like I should be putting a hat on of some kind. That there should be a special stewardship council hat, steward hat, or something of the sort. Anyway, that your explanation does help. Thank you, Ben. Over to Roland.
I think I'm just going to voice agreement that the stewardship council has always felt a little weird to me also. And I think it is an interesting relationality question, even with the current format. I'm curious for someone who would actually be interested in being part of the stewardship council, what their expectations are in terms of their level of involvement. I was thinking how useful it would be to have sort of like on the stewardship council. Yeah, well, I was thinking of people like and this is totally fantasy, but people like Brooke and Elizabeth May and what would be another field? Vanessa Andreotti, having people who are sort of really great in a specific area sort of all coming together once a year to look at, and coming together, I mean, in whichever way, whichever form that takes, coming together to talk things through. Anyway, I don't want to start talking about what the stewardship council is, but I agree that there is a weirdness around the stewardship council, and I think it is, you know, permaculture, the solution is the problem. You know, the way that we talk about Pema talks about the juicy spots, it's a place to practice, yeah, stuff like that. So back to Ronnie.
I have a lot. I think this is a useful conversation. I mean, we just haven't talked about this in a really long time. We haven't needed to, which is fine. I have one idea about maybe changing it to stewardship circle to make it less like a huge commitment and more of like, this is a time for people to gather to be in stewardship. And, you know, we in this room are the ones who've been stewarding this, you know, long term. And I think there's a tension when inviting people to be on the stewardship council of how much do they need to know about the project? How much do they need to understand? And that's one of the perennial tensions, is like some people understand certain aspects, but not others. And sort of, you know, what do they need to know? What do we need from them? Having that be clearer as things continue to evolve, I think would be useful. Over to Ben.
Yeah, and this is, you know, Roland, your comment about having the Vanessa Andreotti, Elizabeth May, etc. That's where I was thinking of the Research Council as opposed to the Stewardship Council. And so there are many different models of how you have a board of directors on a nonprofit. And one of them is called the letterhead board. And the idea is that you are trying to attract influential names so that when people see who's on your board, they write a check. And but the assumption is those people will have little or no involvement ever with your organization. They don't even have to show up. And you have a couple key board members who kind of do show up. You write your quorum and all that kind of stuff. And so that's one model. And the other model, like the other extreme, is that you have a board of directors that actually kind of rolls their sleeve up and they get involved in policy making and that sort of thing. And then you've got the Carver model in the middle, where the board has basically shows up. They are presented, like they show up a couple times a year because they like the organization. They are presented with some information and they go, that's great, thank you. And they turn around and they go away. And so the classic challenge with all of those things is that if people are not involved in the organization, they don't know enough to be helpful. And they do often get in the way because they come in and they start, it's really, really common where you have an organization and a board, and the board is just floating in fantasy land about the organization, and they come up with all of these brilliant strategies and, you know, projects and stuff, and they just have nothing at all to do with the capacity of the actual organization. So in terms of, you know, when we're thinking about the Stewardship Council moving forward, like there's where we've been coming from, where the Stewardship Council was really trying to give people roles where they could get involved, and they are very light roles because we were clear about what it meant to be on the Stewardship Council. It meant meeting 4 times a year, and that was it. 4 times a year by Zoom, where you review, where we present what we're working on. You get an opportunity to express your opinions about it, and you go away. And that's not been enough to get people engaged. And that's very different than as we move forward and there's an official co-op and there are official members who own shares in the organization and have a vested interest in it. Then they show up because they have a vested interest in the organization. So, you know, this is partly, anyhow, I'm not, I don't feel any defensiveness here. What we've been working with and what it needs to morph into are really kind of, we were in phase 1, we're currently in phase 2, and we're moving towards phase 3 of, re-engaging the Stewardship Council. So at this particular juncture, and I also want to pull us back to we really need to do is chunk out, how do we get from here to the end of January? So we don't need a perfect Stewardship Council. We don't need to, figure this all out. Where no one would care if we didn't have a Stewardship Council do anything this year until we've legally chartered the co-op, right? No one would say, oh, you're cheating, and get all pissed off or anything like that. So really, this is a question around how much do we want to walk through the steps properly to say that we've done it, or to, become familiar with it, or to, why would that be useful, right? So we get to shape this. We do have, Bernie actually said he wants to get re-engaged. He's on the Stewardship Council, and we are all on the Stewardship Council, right? So like, this is not an outside, this is us also acting as stewards. We don't have to, we're a co-op. We don't have to separate our roles and say we're not allowed to be on the Stewardship Council. So, how many people would we want to re-engage as part of the Stewardship Council? That's the question. I think I've said enough. Basically, I just wanted to put out there that I agree, this is a really good conversation. And right now we only need to figure out, how do we want to get to the end of January? And, what part of this do we want to take on now? So back over to you, April.
Well, I think we want a meeting of the Stewardship Council before January.
That over to Roland.
Yes.
Uh, so then what is the minimum number of people that we want to have on the stewardship? In a good enough for now and in time for a meeting before January number of people number. So over to Ronnie.
Yeah, I was thinking about, there's meeting before the charrette with the current Stewardship Council, which we can choose to define that how we want to define that. And then there's the charrette, and then moving forward, what is the role of the Stewardship Council? Who are we going to reach out to? So I would say we look at our list of current members, reach out to folks, say, do you want to come to a meeting? We're going to be talking about the charrette. We're going to be talking about 2025. See who responds, see who wants to be involved, as well as, are there any people who are currently involved that we would like to invite to that meeting as well? So we're kind of in an in-between space is what I'm sensing. Back to Ben.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. In terms of number for me, 4. And actually, technically the way the bylaws are written, our minimum, we can have up to 16 people for, the 16 footprints, but a minimum of 4. And the 4 represent our 4 stakeholder groups who are sort of owner types, fair share, actually it's fair share sponsors, farmer caretakers, neighbors, and people, in our community partners, and users of our services are kind of broadly speaking the four categories. And so I would feel if we could have a meeting of four people who would each take on those roles. And I would like, anyhow, I think it doesn't have to be a lot. And so I think it's good for, and I like your plan. We basically say we're going to be following our process. There will be a meeting scheduled in the next, whatever, in the next month or two. And are you still interested? If they are, great. And if they aren't, whatever. And they still get invited on in future things, but we just go on like that. Yeah, that feels like a plan. That part of it. I still have the other consideration I have is actually thinking through a little bit the working backwards from the charrette. Just because, if do we want to do a hybrid or do we want to do it all Zoom? If we do hybrid, then there's all that kind of stuff. So with that, will continue passing to April.
So are we giving,
We're still gathering considerations, so we're still open floor for any considerations.
pass. Two are allowed.
Yeah, I don't have any other considerations. I think I'm ready to work out what needs to be done by when and by whom over to Ronnie.
Not sure. Do we have our notes from last year? We can
Yeah.
look at. Because why not
Yeah.
do that over
You're
to
done.
Ben?
And maybe that's to the next, by the next time we meet. That's a good enough is and that might be just reviewing it. We might go, oh yeah, this is no biggie, or oh right, that this is way I remembered it being so simple and it turns out it was so complicated. So I think, okay, so I can circulate I'm willing to, find the materials and send a link or whatever.
Great.
And then we all review. And what else? And then how are we gonna parse out the current? So we've got somebody needs to review and, well, we could also divide it up. So one of the tasks is reconnecting with the interim. And then also thinking through who we might add. I guess seems like there was one other tasky thing, but I'll pass. So I think there's still questions about how that second bit happens, but I think we're let me know if there's any action items that are missing. Over to you, April.
I can't think of any action items we're missing. Over to Roland.
I'd like some notes on what to say to people. Last year's charrette was about mostly about having the campus here, buying the property, and this year our focus has been more on sort of development of the Lifeboat Academy as an academy, and also getting in the nitty-gritty of the replicable model of buying a property. We're like by looking at the and working a lot on the bylaws and such. I feel like it's a different proposal this year than it was last year. So having some sort of agreed on what's the charrette going to be about? What do we want the Stewardship Council to focus on, to look at? And in a way, kind of clarifying where we are. Anyway, so that's a consideration that I'm bringing forward for this. So over to Ronnie.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. And I kind of feel like the charrette this year, I mean, with the incorporation, with the co-op happening and the academy and the curriculum happening, it's like a lot of infrastructure has been fleshed out this year, a lot of content. And I'm kind of thinking about, we'd mentioned in a previous meeting about having lifeboat builders be involved in the charrette as part of the reciprocity, how everything's connected, we're relational. The land is the center of the project and anchors the project. And so I'm wondering about framing it as sort of, how does this all fit together? Talking about the commitment pooling idea, kind of introducing ways for people to see how, or people being able to see how they can be involved in different ways and how all of that is connected. So it could also, I think it would be important to review the first two charrettes.
Yeah.
And then the years in between, what has happened. Here's where we are now. How does this all fit together, basically, is kind of and obviously we know a lot more about that than people kind of on the outside. So how do we bring them in? I feel like that was kind of nebulous, but I'll stop there. Over to Ben.
No, not at all. In fact, I feel like I'm kind of feeling like we're getting ahead of ourselves, but in a good way. I think because what Roland was talking about, I think, that's really the framing for the charrette. So that's not anything that we need to have done right now, but these are really good. We've got an outline. This is exactly what I was hoping for, is we basically have, here are some outlines, and that's going to backdate everything. So now it's easier to reach out to the Stewardship Council, because I think what Roland is saying, if we can come up with a little bit of a bullet point, we don't have to work out all the details of what the focus is, but here's where we are now, a little reminder bringing you up to speed. Year 1 was this, year 2 was this, here's what we've accomplished, all of which is part of the annual report. And one of the things Ronnie said was the first thing that we need to do is pull the annual report together. So I think that, and I think we can probably do, I'm making a kind of proposal on the fly, because I think that this pulls me back to step number 1 is the annual report, because that'll make a lot of communications easier. looking at the last year's plan will also help refresh where we were and how that worked, which is kind of part of the annual report, you know, kind of where we were now, where we were then, where we are now. And I think actually if I could throw to outreach that the reconnecting with the Stewardship Council,
Yeah.
figuring that, you know, that's basically great for outreach to be focusing on that. Yeah, it feels like I think these are the steps. And then the next step really with the reconnecting with the Stewardship Council is that's outreach to think about that. And it's feeling to me like that's pretty much what we need, but I'm gonna pass it around. So April, over to you.
Well, I'm thinking in somewhat, I mean, I'm thinking year 1, year 2, and year 3, but I'm also thinking about the part where guilds have come to life now. Whereas they were just kind of some language in the first years and people didn't really catch on. In the second year, it was, we were kind of catching on and doing guild stuff. But I think, you know, the introduction of that as a lens of a way of working, which is not the way that most people are used to working, is really, really important to have in here somewhere. And that might be in year 2 with the academy replicability and guilds. Because there's a whole set of energies that comes with that, efficiencies and energies that weren't pulled together in quite that way before. So over to Roland.
I have nothing to add. Good talk. Over to Ronnie.
Yeah, the guilds are working really well. Everybody should do this. Let's make them. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I have nothing to add. Over to Ben.
Cool. No, I agree. And this is all really great. And this is, I feel so much more relaxed because I had this like vague, oh my God, you know, it happens every year. You turn around and it's already the end of the year and you're scrambling to try to get on top of the January thing happening. And now I'm like, oh yeah, there's some stuff we need to do, but we got it. It's so I'm feeling much more sanguine. And in terms of guilds, I believe that the Community Justice Group is going to be initiating our own guilds. We've become big enough and there's enough going on that we're talking about, and it's a very organic process. So yeah, I'm excited. So I think we're good in terms of agenda. So let's just do one last round, last thoughts for the good of the cause, or saying your farewells. So April, over to you.
Well, thank you. For me, this has been a somewhat puzzling process because I felt like I wasn't quite grasping some things, but my grasping has improved by this point in the meeting. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye. Roland.
You're muted.
When is AI going to figure out how to do that for me? I would really like that. I know AI bad, etc. But I have nothing to add. And as you can tell, my brain is melting. So over to Ron.
Mine is too, but I think that was a really, really productive, good meeting. And I think we're in a good place. I mean, it's November 18th. We're not even
Yeah.
at December yet, and we're having this conversation. I think we're setting ourselves up well. So may it continue. Over to Ben.
I agree. A pleasure as always. So thank you all, and yeah, onward and upward. So go enjoy your night. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.